Pawn shops. Let's not pull any punches. This is a business that is built on desperation. And you can still find such cool and really important guitars and pieces of gear and cool watches and cool stuff. So how do you, as a person in 2025, how do you live with that tension between... There's just no way around it. So I have wanted to make this video for years. I'm Jeremy. This is Guitar Hunter. I help people find guitars that they want to grow old with. If you want to build a collection of guitars that really matter, that mean something to you, you're in good company. So I love guitars and I love finding them, and I especially love looking for them in unusual places. But pawn shops, man, they bum me out. So I avoid buying stuff in pawn shops. The last guitar I bought in a pawn shop was probably about 10 years ago. It was down here in Louisiana. I walked in and I saw a left-handed Fender. It was a Mexican standard from the late 90s, but it was a lefty. And it was a cool color. It was like a dark blue. And I just thought it was a cool guitar, and I went over and looked at it, and it was $225. And this is at the time that that was probably a $400 to $500 guitar if it was right-handed. So then I quickly kind of looked up, and I saw what they were going for. I went up and I offered them $175 because that's me. I just like getting a deal. So I walked up, offered $175. They said, perfect. So they took that, and so I got this guitar, restrung it, set it up. This is right when I was starting. One of the first things I ever sold was this left-handed Strat. So this is just going to be a conversation that you and I can have about guitar shops and what's the right role for them and how can you buy stuff from them and not feel like you are just adding to suffering in the world. The problem, pawn shops and suffering. Pawn shops are a business. Their main service that they offer to their clients, customers, whatever, their clients, whatever you say, people that use that service of a pawn shop. The goal is that they would give people access to the equity or the value of things they have if someone, this is like outside of the banking system. So a pawn shop is going to give you a value of what your thing is worth. But the biggest single problem in this business model is that it is built on undervaluing the things that come in. Pawn shops buy things at a rate that is lower than guitar shops, lower than your friends, lower than your family. And that's where the real problem gets to. Most of the people that are in this situation, they have such a need, whatever that need is driving them, that means that probably their family is not going to help them out with it. Their friends are not going to help them out with it. Their church is not going to help them out with it. And so they're at a place where it's just desperation. And so desperation drives bad decisions. Desperation makes you susceptible to predatory actors in the world. Enter pawn shops. So pawn shops critically undervalue things. They give people, 20%, 15% of what a thing is worth. And in exchange, there's two ways that pawn shops work. They're either going to buy that piece of gear and they're going to give a really low amount. And then you're exchanging goods and services for money. And so you're exchanging a guitar for 15%, 20% of what it's worth. And then people are out. The other way that this works is that there's basically a pawn loan. And so this is where a guitar comes in and someone ends up giving a guitar, and in exchange, they say the pawn shop agrees to whatever terms, 30 days, 60 days, and they give them a ticket. They say, we're going to hold this as collateral on this loan. Now, the amount they're giving for collateral is similar to what they're going to buy it for, maybe a touch more. And they're going to say, you have 30 days, 60 days, 90 days to pay us back. And this is where usury comes in. This is where interest comes in. So it's not just the amount that they're giving you. It's that amount plus 25%, 31%, 40%. As you look it up, rates are all over. I'm going to do my best. Do some research. And I'll find what is current pawn rates, if you can find them. They are not regulated, I don't think, by the SEC. And so I don't know how realistic that data will be. But It really, I mean, okay, so that's the structure of how these work, and that's the problem. The problem is desperate people using their last assets or resources and getting just pennies on the dollar of what those things are actually worth. And when they do, they're getting charged interest. If they're not selling things outright, they're going to get charged a ton of interest. So that is the problem with pawn shops. The paradox. Why do we still shop there? I know that I have found incredible, cool guitars at pawn shops. I know that there are pawn shops that work a lot more like guitar shops. I'll put a card to a video I made years ago. I went into a pawn shop in Pentagon City in Virginia, and they had an unbelievable collection of vintage guitars. Super cool stuff. They had bought them from collectors, and so they had operated in a much more ethical sense, and I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush. The reality is that there is a consumer side. People like you and me, we like cool guitars, and I don't have a ton of money, so I can't buy everything at full retail. In fact, there's something in me that does not ever want to pay retail price. So I go to where the deals are, and there are a lot of deals in pawn shops. That is just a reality of this thing. Quick story. Years ago, I found a really cool mid-70s Gibson ES335. Black. Actually, I think it was 80s. I think it was an 81. I'll have to see if I can dig up pictures. So it was a black 335. Maybe late 70s. Super cool. And I found it, and it was on Craigslist. And I called the guy, and he said, "Oh, I own this guitar." And there's a little hang up. It's in the pawn shop. But for $500, I'll give you the pawn ticket, and I only owe $1,400 on it. So I started kind of doing the math on this. And I was like, okay, so that would get me into this guitar for $1,900. Okay, well, I want to go see it. I'll go check it out, see if this is a good deal. Went to the pawn shop, and they said, "No, you can't see it." I was like, okay, well, I'm thinking about buying it. They're like, "Well, we have it in pawn. You can pay it off, and the guy can pick it up, and you can see it then." But they wouldn't let me see it in person, and it just got so complicated. And this guy owed money on that and a couple other items. So really, to get it out of pawn was going to cost about $1,900. So then $1,900 plus the $500 he wanted at $2,400, sight unseen. It was too complicated, too scary. Oh gosh, it just made me so sad. And it was so complicated where it's, okay, I can't see it. I'm trying to help this guy get out of a financial hole that he's in. But I didn't feel like the same thing was happening from the pawn shop. And I understand people are probably just desensitized at this point. They just have seen this. This is every day, open to close. You're dealing with people that are in hard situations, hard life, and they're making bad decisions. And I don't know. I couldn't let my humanity slip in that. But yeah, that's one story where I tried to help, tried to get involved. I mean, I still had something to benefit. But yeah, it just didn't work out to buy that Gibson 335. The historical and ethical context of pawn shops. Pawn shops are built on the premise of usury. Usury is giving someone use of money, and it is built on desperation or need. If you just listen to that sentence, it feels icky. Now, pawn shops existed before personal banking and personal lending existed in the way that our culture is now okay with. My great-grandma was from West Virginia. She was a midwife. She was amazing. And she believed that borrowing money for anything was a sin. I remember when I was a kid, she told me, I asked something about a credit card, and she said that it was sinful to have a credit card. My grandpa said, well, it's a bad idea to borrow money. He didn't say sin. He said it's a bad idea. It's a bad idea to borrow money on anything that's not a house. And then my mom, when I was a kid, my parents were swimming in credit card debt, and it really messed their worlds up. I mean, it was just a constant source of stress and anxiety, I could tell as a kid. So by the time I was coming up, I was like, I don't know about this. It didn't feel as moral as it felt practical, but the sense of like, I'm not going to let myself be subject to someone who gets to decide whether I eat or whether I pay off something, that I'd already purchased before. So I didn't particularly choose to not get into debt, but just the way life worked and that I was protected in some things. By my mid-20s, late 20s, I discovered Dave Ramsey. My wife had been telling me to check this out for years, but we found Dave Ramsey, and that's where we're like, all right, we're doing Financial Peace University. We're getting out of debt. We're getting rid of all credit cards. And so it was really helpful for us. Dave Ramsey has a huge YouTube channel. I'm sure you've seen him, heard him. He's been on the radio for probably 30 years, 35 years. But if you don't know, the basic premise is this: get out of debt. The way you do that, put $1,000 in the bank and then pay everything off other than your house, starting from smallest to biggest. Snowball that momentum, get to where you're just hammering down, getting out of debt. By the time you're out of debt, you take that $1,000 and you build it up to 3 to 6 months of your budget. You have to know how much money is coming in and how much money is going out each month. Then you start saving up for a house. Then you start putting 15% into retirement. And then you also throw everything else, or you help plan for your kids to go to college. At step 7, you're out of debt. You've paid off your house, and no one in the world gets to tell you pretty much anything. That's the goal. That's the hope. That's the very short version of the Dave Ramsey thing. How in the world could you ever buy a guitar from a pawn shop and not feel like a terrible person? I think for me, there's part of this. I don't know, and I can't be responsible for everyone's decision that culminated in my decisions. To the best of my experience and my ability, I can consider what I'm going to buy. With that said, I think that pawn shops, there are a lot of guitars. There are way more guitars than there are people. There are a lot of guitars that people don't care about. They don't need. They're not a big part of their world. They were a Christmas gift forever ago, and they just don't need it. And for a lot of people, pawn shops are a place you can get some money for it. If you're just going to give it away, you could just take to a pawn shop. You'll get some money, and I think that's okay. So in one way, I consider this recycling, buying guitars that people don't want. They're always fun. You always find projects. A quick note is that in my experience, pawn shop guitars all had a hard life. Everyone was beat up. Everyone was tossed in the back of a car without a gig bag or a case. They're rough. They're tumble. All of them have to be a case by case. You got to look at them. But it's fun to get projects, especially electric guitars. Cool body, cool neck. Doesn't matter if the pickups work or not, because you can swap them out. You can customize it and make it your own. Pawn shops are like a mirror. They show you who you are. And a lot of people, it shows you as resilient and tough. And it also shows that there is a lot of suffering to the human condition. I think you have to be wise. I think you have to consider where you're buying guitars, why you're buying those guitars, and you can get a vibe and a read off of the people at a pawn shop. A lot of them, like my friend Sam, who owns a pawn shop in Virginia, that I really love, and I really like how he runs his shop. It is on the retailer, fundamentally, to preserve the dignity of people that you're buying guitars from. That's the thing I've said from the beginning of my YouTube channel. When you are buying a used guitar, it is your responsibility to preserve the dignity of the seller. Because if somebody's in a desperate spot, their integrity is on the line. And they don't get to say, no, I can't do $200 less. And so don't be that guy. I've been that guy, and I have repented of it, and I'm sorry for it, and I'm trying to not be the shameless negotiator. I end up usually picking win-lose negotiations, and I'll make another video at some point about negotiating. But for me, the overall thought is I want to get the best deal I can. And usually that means I'm going to push and push and push and push until someone says, no, I can't do that. And then I know, okay, we're good. We've reached the deal. But yeah, closing this video. I think we need to shop thoughtfully, and I think we need to tell the stories. And remember that every guitar, if you're buying it used, it started out with somebody. And so avoid systems. Okay, I think the best thing that we can do is we can shop thoughtfully. We can know that our consumer decisions and consumer behavior do have effects on culture at large. So buy guitars in a way that you feel good about them, that you get good deals on cool guitars with unique wear and unique stories, but they're not coming at the expense of somebody and their family and their life. And so thanks for watching this video. I'm Jeremy, this is Guitar Hunter. Tell me, what do you think about pawn shops? Am I totally wrong? Am I too squishy, too big-hearted, whatever? Too pretentious. Tell me what you think in the comments down below. I'm Jeremy, this is Guitar Hunter. You have a job. We have a job. We, as guitar hunters, go out and we fill the world with music and friendship. So make cool music, build community around it, have fun. See you later. Bye. Okay.